Hey there, welcome back to another review, this time of another film from the year 1980 and another horror movie. And this time, the underrated, epic, just fantastic old school style haunted house flick, The Changeling, starring George C. Scott and Trish Van Devere. And this is a movie that I saw a while back and I really liked it. And I watched it again recently and it was just as good as I remember it being. This is the type of horror film I really like, especially in terms of ghost stories. Um, this is definitely one of my favorite ghost story films. It's right up there with The Fog by John Carpenter and The Shining by Stanley Kubrick. Um, this is a prime example of a horror film that is very scary and very creepy and eerier and more memorable than a lot of horror films that come out nowadays. Um, and a lot of that is because it is more restrained, it is more old-fashioned in its approach. And what do I mean by old-fashioned? I mean, it doesn't really rely upon jump scares. It's not a paranormal activity type of haunted house story or ghost story. It's not like Ouija. It's not like that. It's more of a slow burn. It's slow paced. It relies more on characters and a good story to keep you engaged. And it only has a few scares. But because it does so well with those few scares, it maximizes their potential, which makes the film so much more scarier to me than a lot of horror films that come out in theaters nowadays. Um, Even It Follows had some problems after recent viewings, especially with sort of how the it would just appear and have just the most outlandish uh, appearance possible. Kind of gave itself away. And it pretty much was, If All Was Kind of Scared were kind of just the Jack in the Box type of thing, which a lot of horror films are nowadays. It's just a bunch of boo scares. And I think a lot of horror films could honestly take a page from The Changeling and how to make a truly scary movie. That's just how I feel. Now, The Changeling is a 1980 film. It's directed by Peter Medak. He didn't really go on to do much else after this, which is really too bad because I think he did a masterful job directing this movie. Um, he did some other stuff afterwards, like The Craze, but for the most part, he also did Species 2, which is a piece of shit. I did not like Species 2. And he did Romeo Was Bleeding, which I've heard of, but I've never seen. Um, and before this, he actually the film that he followed up this with in the theater was Zorro the Gay Blade of all things. Yeah, that movie. Um, but yeah, he directed an episode of Masters of Horror as well. He did an episode called The Washingtonians. But I would probably say this is his finest work. It's written by Russell Hunter and William Gray, as well as Diana Maddox. This is an example of a script that had three writers that they all did a good job. They all added uh, really essential elements to the script. It wasn't one of those, oh, we need three writers to write a very simple story. Um, and the, and Yeah, so the writers also kind of took a page from a supposedly real life haunted house story. It's based on events which supposedly took place at the Henry Treat Rogers Mansion in Denver, Colorado, while writer Russell Hunter was living there during the 1960s. The Chessman Park neighborhood in the movie is a reference to the Chessman Park in Denver, where the original haunting transpired. The real-life haunted house where the real-life events apparently took place was the Henry Treat Rogers Mansion. It was located at 1739 East 13th Avenue, Cheeseman Park, in Denver, Colorado. The house has since been demolished. So, much like the house in this movie, spoiler, which at the end of the movie is pretty much left in shambles, the real house that this haunted house story is based on is also demolished. Now, so the writers took some inspiration from that, and created their own sort of story around it. And the film stars George C. Scott, who's in rare form here. This is my favorite performance of his. He, like a friend of mine actually said in his review of the movie, he says George C. Scott normally plays a lot of larger than life characters. And that's true, like Patton, for instance. And here he plays a normal person, normal guy, a more down to earth character, a composer, John Russell, who's dealt with a tragedy in his life and is trying to get over it the best he can. And so he rents his mansion and thinks that this time alone with him and his music is going to make things better for his life. But of course, it comes with some problems, namely a haunting that he has to deal with. You also have Trish Van Devere, who plays Claire, Claire Norman, who ultimately becomes his new love interest in this movie. You have Melvyn Douglas, who plays Senator Joseph Carmichael. Now, Melvyn Douglas, this is one of his last films he did. He was also in Ghost Story, which is another ghost story movie. I've been curious about it, just haven't got around to seeing yet. You also have John Colicos as DeWitt, Jean Marsh as Joanna Russell. Jean Marsh is memorable to me because this is an actress who I remember pretty much the most for playing Queen Bavmorda in Willow. So, yeah, she has a bit part here as George C. Scott's wife, which is really different to see Jean Marsh, who's this actress I'm so used to playing, like this evil queen, and a total bitch. Really nice lady in this movie. You have Barry Morse, who plays Dr. Pemberton, and there's a few other actors and actresses who are also in the film that add to the cast. Now, this is mainly a Canadian production, and it was made for a budget of $600,000, which is insane when you look at this movie because it looks like it has some really rich, lavish production values, especially when you look at the mansion and everything that is shown in the movie. But really, it's not. It was only made for $600,000. Features music by Rick Wilkins, which I think is extremely underrated. It's a beautiful haunting score that is just very memorable. It invokes all kinds of emotions that fit the film perfectly. It's a really, really beautiful score, and I highly recommend you give it a listen. It's one of those scores that was only released through a limited release, so it's already out of print. There was only like 1,000 copies of the score released by a certain company, but it is on YouTube, so I'll put some links in the video description down below so you guys can listen to the score. I definitely do recommend it. Now, there's a special piece that was for the film that was the music box piece that is definitely one of the more memorable bits of music in this movie. Um, this is a composition that was actually written by Howard Blake. The unabridged composition is featured in his life cycle collection of 24 piano works and 24 keys. Now, so yeah, excellent score by Rick Wilkins, who didn't really go on to really do that much after this. It seems like he did a few things. He's definitely a Canadian composer. That's more of his big claim to fame as a composer from Canada, and he's done a few things like worked on the score for he did a lot of TV movie scores. After this, sadly, he didn't really go on to do that much. He pretty much did The Changeling. That was his only film that he scored, and then everything else was just TV movies. I guess he was an orchestrator for the movie The Millennium from 1989, but other than that, he didn't really go on to do that much, which is really too bad because I think he was just really did an amazing job scoring this film. I think he deserved a lot better. Definitely deserved another chance at scoring another movie. But it didn't work out, which is really too bad. I guess this film is rated R, but it's definitely not a movie that feels like it's an R rating. There's not a lot of swearing. There's not a lot of violence. There's no blood. There's a little bit of blood, but maybe it's just intense subject matter, I guess. Uh, It features cinematography by John Coquelin, who I think did a fantastic job, did a very spectacular job, splendid job here with the cinematography. It's old-fashioned, it's old school, but it fits the film really, really well, and it's really, really nice to look at, especially the way he set up his shots in terms of the panning shots, the tracking shots throughout the mansion. Uh, the film also does a great job with its use of lighting, which is another aspect of the film I definitely want to throw some praise at. It's edited by Leela Peterson and Lou Lombardo. They both did a great job editing the movie. The movie is very tight. It doesn't really feel like it needs much editing, uh, but and that's in large part due to how well it's edited. When a film is edited well, folks, you can't really tell whether or not, okay, this is a film that needed some trimming. That's because it's so well edited. When a movie isn't edited well, you can tell right away. When a movie is edited really well, it's kind of hard to notice because there isn't as much going, unless there's always different sort of storylines and plot lines going on in the movie. But there's a little bit of that going on in this film, but not much. So but yeah, I definitely think this is a definitely well edited film. Now, the director Peter Medak was actually not the first choice to direct this movie. Donald Cammell was initially slated to direct the film, but he eventually left due to creative differences with the producers. Now, Donald Cammell is a director who is known for directing films like Demon Seed, which is a 1977 film that I've heard about but I never got around to seeing, which sounds like a really crazy movie with Julie Christie, where a robot named Proteus, I think, pretty much bangs Julie Christie, finds a way to inseminate her, and he is trying. That's the demon seed. She's going to give birth to some artificial intelligence. He also directed Why of the Eye, which is a film that is considered a pretty overlooked sort of classic by a lot of people. I haven't got around to seeing it yet. I believe David Keith is in that one. And he also directed Performance, which is a 1970 film that was Mick Jagger's first, I think it was his acting debut. So he was originally going to direct it, but he dropped out. Uh, and then even after he dropped out, Peter Medak was not originally given the job because there were other directors. Tony Richardson declined due to creative differences as well. And Tony Richardson is a director who is well known for directing films like Mahogany and he Blue Sky, which is one of the last films he did. He worked on a TV movie for Family Opera in 1990. He was an uncredited director of Mahogany. He directed The Border with Jack Nicholson. Uh, so yeah, it just didn't seem so. Peter Madoc wasn't their first choice, but he did a great job. And the writers, Adrian Morale and William Gray, they spent around 6 months doing research for the film, which included copious newspaper articles on parapsychological encounters and over 700 books and almost 200 case histories. This definitely did show in the film. This felt like a movie that definitely it was taken seriously. The writers obviously took their time with the script and didn't really see it as some throwaway film or some throwaway idea. And that really does show in this movie from every aspect. It seems like a film that definitely had a lot of care put into it and a lot of respect as well. And that goes a long way because this film it's an old-fashioned type of scary movie, but at the same time it carries that same old-fashioned sensibility, of a little bit of that nobility and respect that comes with some of these older movies, and especially in an era in the 1980s, in 1980 where the slasher sort of stuff was starting to become more popular. Uh, the Changeling would kind of represented the end of an era, so to speak. And this is a film that's definitely inspired a lot of other movies that have come out after it, including films like Insidious, which knowing that's why I don't understand why this is only on an old HBO DVD. why this does not have a Blu-ray release in the United States with features. I don't really understand it. Now, thankfully, though, this DVD still looks really good for the most part. It's a good transfer. And it's actually, sadly, a lot better than the transfer, the only Blu-ray release to date, which is the Japanese Blu-ray release, which I've heard and seen pictures of, and it's an absolute mess. And the film deserves a lot better than that. So hopefully someone like Arrow or Scream Factory or somebody can get their hands on the Changeling, Synapse, some company, and give it the proper remastering that it deserves, because it honestly does. And I'm not the only one. This film has a pretty high rating on IMDb. A lot of critics liked it. Variety called it a superior haunted house thriller, and I agree with every word that Variety has to say about this movie. Now there was a few, of course, in any movie there's some critics who definitely don't agree. Roger Ebert was one of them. He gave it 2.5 out of 4 stars, mainly because he thought George C. Scott's character was too serious. So therefore, because he thought that because George C. Scott's character wasn't freaking out and being scared all the time, that the movie wasn't scary. To each their own, Roger. May you rest in peace. But I gotta call bullshit on that. I'm sorry. Really? Not everybody shows their fear the same way. Some people show fear in a more subdued way. They're just speechless. I mean, obviously these events affected George C. Scott's character. I mean, he literally passes out at one point in the movie. Um, so it obviously affected him. It just affected him in a different way than it does other people. So Roger Ebert's upset that George C. Scott's character didn't act in a stereotypical horror film way, like a final girl who, whenever something scary happens, he goes, ah, yeah, no, because I guess he thought that that's what makes something scary. I don't know. No wonder I don't really honestly look at Roger Ebert. I don't go to Roger Ebert for uh, what makes a good horror film. I don't. And this is Exhibit A, for instance, and there's a whole lot of other exhibits when it comes to that. But anyway, yeah. What's another thing that I want to talk about before I actually talk about the plot and everything, and when I talk about the plot, I'm going to go straight into spoilers. I don't want to spoil it too much for people who haven't seen this. It's actually on YouTube and really good quality. Um, and multiple different links of this film are on YouTube. So I'll put a link to the full movie in the video description down below as well. Because if this sounds interesting to you, and old school haunted house horror film with some old school scares, the type that makes you afraid of things that go bump in the night, stuff that isn't just generic CGI crap. It's not all about the jump scares. It's not all about that. It's more about characters and a good story with a mystery element. If you like these different genres being blended into one movie, I highly recommend The Changeling because it does an excellent job, if you ask me, blending together the horror genre with the mystery genre and with a little bit of the thriller genre. And there's a little bit of drama in there as well. So, yeah, I personally feel it's a masterpiece. I personally feel it's a masterpiece of horror, a masterpiece of suspense, and a masterpiece of a ghost story and a mystery. It's just a fantastic movie. It's an excellent film. It stays with you. There's a lot of things that this film deals with, and themes that this film deals with, and the stuff that it shows you, and imagery that just sticks with you. And I don't really want to ruin it for people who haven't seen it yet. So I'm going to talk about a few little bits of trivia, and then I'm going to go on into major spoilers, and I will definitely let you guys know when that happens. So anyway, some of the last bits of trivia I want to talk about when it comes to this movie is that this is a film that has a really big mansion in it. Beautiful production design. So the film, when you see this mansion that George C. Scott's character rents out, you would think, oh, this is just some mansion that they rented out. Well, that's not the case, actually. This house doesn't exist. The house that's seen in this film is not real. because the filmmakers could not find a suitable mansion to use for the film at a cost of around $200,000. The production had a Victorian Gothic mansion facade attached to the front of a much more modern dwelling in a Vancouver street. This construction was used for the filming of all the exteriors of the movie's Carmichael Mansion. The interiors of the haunted house were an elaborate group of interconnecting sets built inside a film studio in Vancouver. And I cannot sing the praises enough of the production designers and the art directors for this movie, because they did such a stellar job with the production design that I had no idea that this was not a real mansion until I read this. I was stunned. I was like, what? This wasn't a real mansion? No, apparently it wasn't. Which that makes the film's mansion production design and art direction an example of one of the most underrated moments of production or and art design in film history, if you ask me. I mean, if you've seen this film, you know what I mean. They did an amazing job. It's stunning to think that the interiors were just a set on a sound stage, and the outside of the mansion was a facade. It's amazing. It's definitely something you probably wouldn't see nowadays, because they probably just do it with CGI. But I'm not going to try to make this an anti-CGI thing. But I'm just saying, it's spectacular what the production design, the crew, and everyone was able to do when it comes to the the mansion for this film. Now, this is a movie that I'm not alone in terms of being a fan of. Martin Scorsese himself included this movie in his top 11 scariest horror films of all time list. Um, and filmmaker Alejandro Amenabar, who directed the others, he definitely said this film was an inspiration. And you could tell. I personally think the others is kind of a poor man's Changeling. So I can kind of see, how he kind of definitely was inspired by the film. Now, that's it. That's all I'm going to do for the little bit of the backstory when it comes to this movie. Now I'm going to get into major spoilers here. So if you haven't seen the film yet, uh, check it out. Got a link in the video description down below. Check it out. Um, and then watch the rest of this review later. Because I want you to check it out. See for yourself. Who knows? You might really like it, or you might not. But either way, I don't want to ruin it for you, because there's a serious mystery element in this that I don't want to ruin for you. So I want you to experience the film, like a lot of people do when they first see this, and see the mystery unravel in real time along with George C. Scott, and that makes the experience a lot more rewarding. So I definitely don't want to ruin it for you. So now we're getting to major spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film yet, definitely look away, or you can if you want. I mean, you can watch it if you want to, but I'm just gonna say, I'm definitely gonna spoil it for you. The film starts out with John Russell, or George C. Scott. He's a composer living in New York. He moves cross country to Washington State following the deaths of his wife and daughter in a traffic accident while on winter vacation in upstate New York. And the film opens up with this accident, and it's so tragic. And I really like the way that this was shot. It wasn't sensational. It wasn't it wasn't one of those it didn't really show the impact. And in a lot of ways, to me at least, it was more effective in terms of really hitting my heartstrings, really hitting me in the heart, so to speak, because it's definitely unexpected. Uh, his wife and his kid, his daughter, are just playing in the snow alongside the road. They've had some car trouble. George C. Scott goes across the street, gets into a telephone booth, and then he basically is helpless. He stands there watching helplessly as an accident happens that ends up tragically taking the life of his wife and kid, his wife and his daughter. So in order to get over this grief, or in order to move on, he moves to Washington State, and he moves into the suburbs of Seattle, and he rents a large old Victorian era mansion and begins piecing his life back together. One of the aspects of the film I definitely liked about it. I mean, there's just so many things to say about this movie, so forgive me if I flub my words. Um, but one of the things I liked about the movie definitely was George C. Scott's character. He's the anchor of this movie. I really like him. I like him. I like the fact that he's a strong character. I like the fact that he's not hysterical. I like the fact that he takes on this mission, so to speak, that is given to him by a spirit. He takes it on, and he realizes, okay, maybe I am the only one who can solve this mystery. So I like that. I like how he takes charge. And so John, of course, and I also like the fact that he's a composer. That's another thing that makes him stand out. How many films of this type do you see where the main guy is a composer? I think that's something unique as well. So John soon discovers that he has unexpected and unwelcome company in his new home, the unhappy ghost of a young boy. The ghost makes its presence felt by various phenomena, such as shattering windows, abruptly opening and shutting doors, and this is the stuff that always creeps me out. This is a film that truly scares me because scary to me, something that's truly horrifying, is something that stays with you, something that makes your skin crawl long after the movie is over, something that makes you wake up in the middle of the night sweating with a chill down your spine. That's the kind of thing that is really scary to me. And The Changeling is full of these moments, the type of things where a piano key plays by itself while you're out of the room. A door opens up by itself while you're in the room. He goes up in upstairs. He hears running water. He goes into a bathroom upstairs. He goes in, turns off the sink. The bathtub is running. He turns the bathtub water off, and then for a split second, you see the body of a little boy basically looking up at you through the water. That entire scene just freaked me out. That's just a very subtle horror. That's very subtle horror, and that's the most effective horror to me. The stuff that, did I really see what I think I saw? And then it just escalates as the film goes on. But it never really goes into oogie boogie, territory, or yeah, boo scares or any of that stuff. It's more, it still remains pretty subtle and restrained in its approach in terms of how it scares you, but that makes it so much more effective to me. Um, so, and specifically, there's scenes like this. Okay, there's a little girl later in the film. She's been having these nightmares about this little boy who's basically floating up through her floor. And you see she's scared again. She gets up, and you see the shot of a little boy who looks like he's in water, drowning, and shows up through the floor. And it's a very powerful image and a very powerful sequence, and it's really well done. They did a great job setting it up and putting it together on such a low budget, and it's a very powerful moment. And it definitely one of those moments where it does make you jolt. It makes you jolt, just like the moment when George C. Scott sees the little boy in the tub earlier in the movie. But of course, there's two pretty much iconic scares in this movie that a lot of people remember, and I definitely do too, because before I even saw this movie for the first time a while back, I saw some clips of it in something called Bravo's Scariest Movie Moments, and I think it was 100 Scariest Movie Moments or whatever, and The Changeling was in one of them. And I think they mentioned like a couple scary moments from this movie. So you had like definitely the one a lot of people remember, and for good reason. Is George C. Scott has this little ball, this rubber ball that his daughter used to play with, and so he kept it with him. And for old time's sake, while all these hauntings are going on, he basically hears a bouncing. It sounds like something is bouncing down the stairs, and it's the ball. So he grabs it. Of course, immediately he goes upstairs, looks in the toy chest to see if the ball is still there, and it's not. Of course, this freaks him out, And so he basically decides, all right, I need to know, is this in my head? Am I hallucinating like some people are saying I am? Or is this for real? So he grabs the ball and he drives, gets in his car, drives to the side of a bridge, drops it off into the water. Comes back to the mansion, thinking that's all solved, nothing's gonna, everything's gonna be fine. And then he hears the sound again. And he sees the same red rubber ball, sopping wet, bouncing down the stairs. If that doesn't make your hair stand up, I don't know what will. Because that is automatic proof that there's some supernatural shit going on. That this is stuff that cannot be explained away by I'm overworked and I'm tired. Or stress. This is something else entirely. And so yeah, that's definitely a very creepy, scary moment in the film. An effective movie. It's scarier than a lot of things I've seen in a lot of horror films nowadays. Scarier than anything I've ever seen in a Paranormal Activity movie. And all it is just a red rubber ball bouncing down the stairs. And then, of course, you have the stuff with the wheelchair, which is also pretty scary when it goes in and rolls after Trish Van Devere, and near the end of the movie. And then there's this one, the Salient Scene, which I was one of the best Salient scenes I've ever seen in a film, where this is when he's starting to hear all this stuff. He at 6 o'clock in the morning, he always hears this banging every time, never fails. 6 o'clock, knock, bang, 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 bang. And so it drives him nuts. So he's wondering, what's going on here? He even does some investigating of his own. And he tries to figure out, he goes up and actually he does investigating of his own after he basically walks out of his mansion and some glass breaks on some window, which is window to the attic. So he ends up going up trying to look for the attic. And just like I said, the lighting in this and the production design, it's dark, it's creepy, you got cobwebs everywhere. It's definitely a frightening place to be. And you don't know what's up there. So he goes up there and he finds that there's a door, but these cabinets. This cabinet is literally nailed to the door. So obviously trying to keep something out. So part of me was like, I don't know, maybe you should just leave it, because wouldn't you? Something's there for a reason, trying to. But no, he rips the cabinet apart, and he goes in and grabs a hammer. And there's a lock on the door. He decides to break the lock. He's curious and wants to know what's up there. Why the glass broke. You could say he's still kind of a skeptic at this time, so to speak. Now, during this scene, something really creepy happened while I was watching the movie. Okay, I was watching the movie. There he's banging. He's trying to break the lock open. And then the picture on my TV starts to flicker. And the sound goes out. And this is late at night. I'm watching The Changeling. Whew! That was some creepy ass shit. So what was the thing? I literally thought for a second, like, is like a ghost fucking with me right now? Is it literally while I'm watching The Changeling, is a ghost like messing with my TV? Am I experiencing a haunting right now because I'm watching The Changeling? But then I went and checked, and it was just my HDMI cable wasn't connected into the back of my player right. So that's all it was. But still, it was so random. It happened out of the blue. You can't blame me for thinking that it might be something else for that little bit, because I've never seen that happen before. So yeah, that was pretty creepy. It didn't happen again for the rest of the movie, but yeah. Um. So yeah. That so after he finds out what's in there, he finds the music box, and then of course you flash forward and you have all this other stuff that goes on in the plot. I'm not going to go through the entire plot of the movie, because it'd take forever. I really don't want to do that. I just want to talk about certain specific sequences of the film that I really liked, and these are definitely sequences I did enjoy. And so he finds out what's in the attic, and then later on in the film, he has a seance. And this is a very effective seance sequence. I like the way it's set up, where you have this older couple, come in, and psychics are in come into the mansion. They set up a table. Uh, there's this older woman. She's got her husband, and he's translating these things that she basically writes on a piece of paper when she starts communicating with the spirits. And I thought that was a nice touch. Okay, when she's talking to the spirit, supposedly is supposed to be there, and you see great great tracking pan shots, POV shots from the point of view of the ghost, when she's speaking to the ghost, basically trying to find out what the name of this ghost is. Finds out the name of it. It's Joseph. Who did you die in this house, Joseph? Did you die in this house? And then just in the music, the mood, everything, the atmosphere is just pitch perfect in this sequence. It's perfect. And then, of course, this is a moment that got a lot of people when it came out in the theater. The few people that did see it, there's a glass vase near the end of the seance. It just flies off a table and smashes into a wall. And the sound design is another thing about this movie that is really, really well done. Every little noise, every little creak, every little, bang, everything is just it just works so well. It's definitely one of the best haunted house films out there, without a doubt. So, and then there's this mystery element, which is another thing I want to talk about. And it becomes a sort of George C. Scott with Trish Van Devere, who kind of becomes his new love interest, but they don't really have sex, and they don't need to. They just become really friends and acquaintances she's with this historical society who helped him get this house. And there's all these weird things going on. It seems like people are trying to cover up something. And you find out, yeah, things do go deeper than you might think. It goes all the way up to the senator. And you find out that the changeling itself is the senator, which is really crazy. And what do you mean by changeling? Well, this is where you get the big bombshell, the big reveal, where this kid Joseph Carmichael, who was the one that is haunting the house, well, he was murdered. He was murdered in the house by his father. He was drowned to death in a bathtub in the attic. And then his body was taken by his dad to, his dad's ranch, and he threw him in a well. And he got an orphan and pretty much made some things, made some moves to pretty much make this orphan his son. He killed his real son and replaced him with an orphan, and then sent this orphan overseas. And since World War I or World War II was going on, I forgot exactly which one it was. Well, he didn't arrive back home until he was 18, which is perfect. Because he did all of this. He murdered his son, drowned him in the attic, in the bathtub, which is just such a despicable act of just cruelty and murder and just awfulness. And it's just so sad. And it just definitely the film has a good amount of balls for that kind of thing. Nowadays they never do that. And uh and that's another thing I liked about the film, is that this ghost is not evil. It's not an evil ghost. This is actually the ghost of a little boy who was murdered by his father, and he's just trying to uh, find peace. He's trying to put his soul to rest. And George C. Scott helps him do that. That's the whole concept of the film, is that George C. Scott is not your typical haunting where it's an evil ghost spirit that's trying to possess somebody or kill somebody or kill everybody or do whatever. Not like Amityville Horror where it's like, get out, and flies everywhere. No, it's a spirit of a young boy who was murdered, and he wants to uh, find peace, and he wants to find justice. And I like that about the film. I actually like that a lot about this movie. It makes it stand out so much from all of these other haunted house movies. So he he gets George C. Scott's help, And, this is a kid, so he does get a little bit impatient and have some temper tantrums every now and then, which manifests in ghostly activities, slamming doors and doing all kinds of stuff. And I like the scene where George C. Scott basically says, "You son of a bitch! What do you want from me?" I did everything I could. I think that was a great moment because it was building up to that, and that's the one moment you have George C. Scott getting really angry, like he does, like he does in a lot of these other movies, yelling and screaming. But he's really great at that, so I can see why a lot of these movies he was in had him yelling and screaming because he's really good at that. But anyway, so you get the reveal is so I didn't see it coming, and it was just like, wow, this is so sad. So you're definitely wanting George C. Scott to help this poor boy's soul, help, solve the mystery, solve the crime, and put his soul to rest. And that's what happens in the movie. Um, so I mean, that's one of the main things I definitely want to discuss is the twist, the big reveal, the mystery, so to speak. And the changeling, like I said, is the senator and Melvyn Douglas, and he inherited an empire because, like I was saying earlier, the mode I didn't really reveal the motive, but this is the motive the father had to kill his son. His son was sick, he was crippled, and there was something that was going on in his will or whatever that his son, if he lived to the age of 21, he'd inherit a lot of money but if he didn't, he wouldn't get anything, and then his father wouldn't get anything either. So it was an act of greed. Money truly is the root of all evil. And he murdered his son because he didn't feel he would make it to 21, and he replaced him with somebody else. And George C. Scott helps, find the little boy's remains in where the well was, which there was a house built over it. He also finds the medallion that went around Joseph's neck that proves that this was the real Joseph Carmichael. And he even tries to confront the senator about this. And he sends this cop in to basically try to strong arm him. Says, "You stop blackmailing the senator, or we'll have you arrested, or we're actually going to get a warrant for your arrest. We're going to warrant to search your house. We'll tear it apart to find that medallion because it's not yours." And then there's a great shot in the film where George C. Scott looks in a mirror at the mansion, and then you see this spinning shot of the police officer who is in a car, and you see it from the point, basically see his face in the car windshield as if the car's spinning out of control in the air, which is what happens, and you see it reflected in the mirror. So it's like this spinning shot. It's an excellent shot. I just describing it doesn't do enough justice. I would love to show it to you, but I can't. But anyway, definitely, if you've seen the movie, you know what I mean. And so then it becomes like a revenge. The little boy, the spirit of Joseph is let loose. He starts getting revenge, kills the one guy who's basically trying to fuck things up, and then eventually he gets his revenge on the changeling, the guy who took his place, who has a fortune he didn't earn, it didn't deserve. And you have the climax of the movie where the house starts to tear itself apart, it starts to burn up, and George C. Scott tries to go up and try to confront Joseph's spirit himself, but he gets knocked off the stairwell, and then he sees what looks like Melvyn Douglas's character, Senator Carmichael, walking up the flaming stairs, and really what it is, it's his soul that's walking up these stairs to basically be damned for all eternity and to die along with Joseph. Because ultimately that's what happens when his spirit goes in and goes up the stairs and goes into the attic where Joseph is, then his body dies as well. And the house then burns to the ground, and of course George C. Scott gets away after Trish Van Devere saves him, gets him out of the house before it burns to a crisp. And then one of the last shots of the movie is just the house is burnt up, and then the music box that is the music box that Joseph really liked starts playing, and that's pretty much the end of the movie. Now there were other stuff that like, I just want to mention more little brief sort of things. Speaking of the music box, there's a nice little scene where uh, uh, George C. Scott, he was playing this particular piece, and then when he heard the music in the music box, it matched the piece that he was playing, that he was working on, for, that he was composing, which is definitely an eerie moment. And he even says to people like, "No, like I never heard this before, and I was working on this, and then I, found the music box, and it played the same tune." And then when he's also listening to the seance, because he recorded the seance with a more high-tech tape recorder. High tech for 1980 standards. Not nowadays, but back then definitely. And he starts listening to it, and he hears the spirit of the boy answer. So it's like, "What is your name?" "Joseph." And then he's like, "What?" He rewinds it. "What is your name?" "Joseph." It's just like, the type of EVB type, stuff, electronic voice recordings. Um, but yeah, those are just a few little things I wanted to mention in terms of little bits and pieces of the film, certain sequences. Other than that, I don't know what else to say about this movie. I think it's a really well directed movie by Peter Medak. The performances by the cast are really well done. They're great, especially by George C. Scott. I thought Trish Van Devere did a good job as his counterparts in this movie. They had great chemistry with one another. They were both really likable characters. Um, the whole premise of a spirit who's not really evil, spirit of a young boy haunting a house, trying to get people to solve his murder and to put him at peace finally, to lay him to rest, is a really I think a really nice uh concept for a haunted house film, and something you don't see a lot. The score is a really a treat to my ears. The production design, I've raved about it before. I can do it again. They do an amazing job at such a low budget. There's a little bit of effects, but there's nothing really spectacular in terms of visual effects or anything like that. And the film's actually works really well in a lot of ways because it doesn't do that. I mean, there's films that do that kind of stuff that I like a lot. Poltergeist I love just as much as this, but Poltergeist is a different type of haunted house story. That's more of like a special effects extravaganza. That's like an adventure. That's this is more of slow pace, slow burn, old fashioned mystery thriller, and it works really well. I never thought it was boring, despite its slow pace. See, the film being slow paced doesn't automatically mean it's boring. See, the thing when I talk about pacing, if I say it's slow, it has to be really slow, like really sluggish, and then it's a problem. That's usually because the story isn't engaging enough, and the characters aren't engaging enough, and there's not much else to the film other than just a lot of sequences happening one after another, and some feel like they're drug out. This isn't one of those movies to me. I was captivated uh, from beginning to end with the Changeling. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about the movie. I think I've said enough. It's been over 40 minutes, but it's a great film. I honestly think it deserves a long, in-depth review. But anyway, I don't know what else to say except thank you for watching my review of The Changeling. And of course, if I was to rate it out of 5 stars, it would get nothing less than 5 out of 5. It's in my top 5 of all-time favorite ghost stories. Uh, yeah, I love it. I love The Changeling. It's a really really great movie. Uh, and if you haven't checked it out, definitely give it a look. But anyway, thank you for watching, and as always, I will see you guys later. See ya.